I get asked a lot of questions about what the ketogenic diet is and how it works in weight loss. This video is a brief introduction to the ketogenic diet. In a separate video, I'll talk about its use in weight loss. To understand how a ketogenic diet works, we need to have a basic idea of how the body manages its energy. We get our energy from the sugars or carbohydrates and fat in the diet. Excess fat is stored in the fat tissue, also called adipose tissue, with a small amount of fat stored in the liver and muscle. Excess carbohydrate is stored as glycogen, mostly in the liver and muscles. However, our glycogen stores have a limit, usually somewhere between 300 and 400 grams, which is barely enough for a day. Once these stores are full, any remaining carbs are converted to fat for storage in the adipose tissue, which is pretty much limitless. When available, the body prefers to use carbs for energy. For people eating a typical modern Western diet with its high carb content, the body will get 50 to 60% of its daily energy from carbs and most of the remainder from fat, with a small proportion coming from protein, as the body can convert amino acids, the building blocks of protein, to sugar and fat so that they can be used for energy production. One of the main hormones for controlling energy storage in the body is insulin. Insulin levels increase after we eat sugars, but it doesn't just control the level of sugar in the blood. It also favours the conversion of any excess sugar to fat and the storage of fat in fat stores. While you continue to eat carbs, your insulin levels will limit access to your stored fat, as insulin blocks fat in the fat cells. Low-carb diets and ketogenic diets in particular cause your insulin levels to fall, giving your body greater access to your stored fat. The ketogenic diet, or keto diet, is a diet that is very low in carbohydrates, so low in fact that it's insufficient to replenish what we use from our carb store each day. After a few days, the carb store basically runs out, forcing the body to increase its use of fat for energy production. Some tissues, like muscle, can burn fat directly, but others can only use fat after it's been processed in the liver to produce what we call ketone bodies, hence the name ketogenic diet. Ketone bodies are formed even on a normal diet, but at very low levels. When dietary carbohydrates are strictly limited, the increased use of fat for energy increases the production of ketone bodies, leading to a state we call nutritional ketosis. The only essential measure to push us into ketosis is to stop eating almost all sugars and other digestible carbohydrates. Remember, fibre is a type of carbohydrate, but it's not digestible, so it doesn't get absorbed. Fibre, in the form of low-carb vegetables such as leafy greens, cauliflower and broccoli, can and should be eaten during a ketogenic diet, as it helps to resolve one of the side effects of keto diets, which is constipation. The body only needs a very small amount of carbs each day, and it can make sufficient for those needs from other molecules in the body, including, as I mentioned earlier, from protein. So, theoretically, we can survive on a diet with zero carbs, though this is not a good idea, as, among other reasons, it risks excessive breakdown of protein and loss of muscle, and the body can cope with a small amount of carbs without being pushed out of ketosis. And what about the fat content of a ketogenic diet? You'll read in many places that ketogenic diets are high-fat diets. Actually, fat has nothing to do with whether or not you enter ketosis, so we can adjust the amount of fat according to the desired calorie intake. If you want to lose weight, you reduce the fat content. If you want to stay at a stable weight, then you need to increase the amount of fat in the diet to make up for the calories no longer obtained from carbohydrates. Of course, you should be using healthy sources of mono and polyunsaturated fats and avoiding a high intake of saturated fats. Some authors refer to ketogenic diets as high-protein diets. Again, the amount of protein does not affect ketosis unless you have an excessively high protein intake. A well-designed ketogenic diet will provide sufficient protein to maintain healthy body functions and to prevent a loss of muscle. It's advisable to seek expert advice to ensure you receive an appropriate protein intake, as both insufficient and excess protein intakes can be harmful. Almost all tissues in the body can use ketone bodies for energy. Only the red blood cells can only use glucose. The brain can use ketone bodies, but also needs a small amount of glucose for optimal function. As I mentioned above, through a process called gluconeogenesis, the body can make glucose from other molecules to cover its requirements when it doesn't receive sufficient in the diet. Apart from some medicines that alter energy management and some rare medical conditions that require dietary carbohydrates, ketosis is very safe. Some people are concerned about diabetic ketoacidosis, which is a serious complication of diabetes and some other conditions and should be considered a medical emergency. Nutritional ketosis is very different and is a normal and safe physiological state that we enter when carbohydrates are not available. In someone who is otherwise well and is not on certain types of medication, diabetic ketoacidosis will not occur during a well-designed ketogenic diet. There are reports that high-fat ketogenic diets with a high proportion of saturated fats can raise LDL or bad cholesterol levels. However, a meta-analysis looking at very low-calorie ketogenic diets, which are low-fat versions of the keto diet, showed a fall in LDL cholesterol. In summary, the ketogenic diet has very positive effects on carbohydrate metabolism and, in its low-fat variant, is a useful method for healthy weight loss. However, as it can affect or be affected by certain diseases or medicines, medical advice should always be sought before starting to use this diet option. Ketogenic diets have many additional beneficial metabolic effects, such as improving blood sugar control and reducing chronic inflammation. I discuss these in another video. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful.